And good evening, everybody. I'm Aaron Gilchrist. We begin Top Story with another destructive and dangerous storm this December. Tornado warnings issued in several states. 100 million Americans from Arizona to New York under some type of weather alert at this hour. There's new video showing a trailer being tossed around in Colorado. That as hurricane-force winds pummel the area. Thousands already without power there. The system also bringing near whiteout conditions and drenching rain. In California, mudslides wiping out roads and flash floods sweeping cars into rivers as crews scramble to rescue drivers. Another round of severe weather coming as several states clean up from that deadly tornado outbreak. Today, President Biden touching down in Kentucky, visiting towns reduced to rubble. We are already hearing reports of more tornadoes touching down in the Midwest tonight. Let's get right to Tom Llamas now, who leads us off from Colorado.
Tonight, new tornadoes whipping across the Midwest. Official warnings stretching to at least 5 states. Thousands bracing for cover as a massive storm wave pushes through the country, bringing this blinding snow plus dangerous winds. The system so powerful, it tossed this trailer right across a highway.
Stop!
From the West Coast to the Great Plains. A deluge of rain and hurricane-force winds, leaving thousands without power. Even trapping drivers, many with no way home. The unprecedented storm first slammed into Southern California on Tuesday. Record-breaking rain quickly turning the LA River into raging rapids, swallowing vehicles and prompting swift water rescues.
We had a white two-door car here early on, and now there's a T-top also. We have 2 vehicles stacked up.
After months of drought, burn scars transformed overnight into dangerous mudslides, forcing evacuations and stranding those left behind.
Tree branches and drywall, ceiling, everything coming down. She's very fortunate that she was not injured.
The storm of the season now battering the Rockies and gaining strength. Gusts of up to 107 miles per hour crashing into Colorado. 50,000 businesses and homes in the metro Denver area without power. At Denver International Airport, closed runways leading to mounting delays and more than 100 cancellations. And in the Midwest, this dust bowl growing in size. Parts of Oklahoma and Kansas battling high winds and severe weather. Holy With 89 million people under wind alerts across the country, tonight a new threat as a second storm quickly approaches the west.
Tom Llamas joins us now from Copper Mountain, Colorado. Tom, those severe weather conditions we saw continuing there tonight. What's in store for the West with that second storm now?
That's right, Aaron. Well, there's a lot going on out west and really extreme weather all over the country. Here in Colorado, we'll stay with those strong winds. We'll feel them tomorrow morning. I spoke with our weather team earlier tonight, and they tell me that tomorrow morning, because of all of that strong weather, those strong winds and the extreme chill, it's going to feel like 22 degrees below zero here in Colorado, as states all across the country are going to be watching forecasts.
And Tom, obviously you're out there in Colorado tonight, not back here in the studio in New York. What have you been working on today?
Yeah, you know, Aaron, I'm actually, after I get done with you, I'm going to call my agent. I'm out here in the freezing weather. You're there in the studio. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. We were actually, in all seriousness, we're actually coming out here to Colorado because we have a big interview leading up to the Olympics. We happen to fly into breaking news, all of this extreme weather, but it's really all over the country tonight. It's incredibly serious, so we're happy we're able to follow this report. So we'll see you tomorrow back there in studio, Aaron.
All right, thanks, Tom. Have a safe trip home. And with that severe weather making its way across the country, millions are facing a potentially dangerous night ahead. Al Roker joins us now here on Top Story to time it out for us. Al, what do we need to know?
Well, Aaron, here's the deal. We've got some severe weather developing right now. On the backside, there's snow, but ahead of it, with record warm temperatures, 7 million people under tornado watches right now. And for the first time ever, the state of Minnesota has a tornado watch in effect. Never happened before. But we also have a moderate risk to a marginal risk for 10 million people stretching from Wisconsin all the way down into the Central Plains with this system as it pushes to the east. We could be looking at tornadoes, wind gusts of 70 miles per hour, and damaging hail up to an inch. And in fact, those winds, a big factor, 72 million people from New Mexico all the way to western New York could see very strong winds tonight on into tomorrow morning. In fact, Lamar, 107 mile per hour wind gusts. Colorado Springs, 100 miles per hour. Dodge City, 84 miles per hour. And ahead of this, we got very warm, record-breaking temperatures that are going to move into the northeast. We could see records in Boston, New York, Hagerstown, Cleveland, Alpena, Michigan, Charleston, Buffalo, and Burlington, Vermont, as this system continues to push up ahead of it. Very, very warm air. But again, the big story that we are worried about, the top story we're worried about, Aaron, tonight, are those severe thunderstorms that could spawn tornadoes. The biggest problem, these are nighttime tornadoes, just like we saw on Friday. And the problem is the fatality risk is twice as great for nighttime tornadoes as they are for daytime.
All right, we appreciate the heads up Al Roker for us tonight. Thank you, Al. Now to the pandemic and the coast-to-coast rise in cases. The Delta and Omicron variants fueling the spread now. This as health experts warn us that the worst days of the surge could still be ahead. People now being told a booster shot may be your best protection ahead of the holidays. NBC's Miguel Almaguer reports.
Preparing for Omicron cases to begin doubling every 2 days here in the U.S. Tonight, as the mutation accelerates its path to becoming the most dominant strain in the nation, authorities now say there is no need for a variant-specific booster.
All right, big six.
While vaccines may offer less protection than against earlier strains, they still appear to stave off serious illness and, when followed by a booster, offer more immunity.
If we didn't have these tools, I would be telling you to really, really be worried. But we have tools. So get vaccinated, get boosted, and the alleviation of the concern, even though we take all of this very seriously.
As hospitalizations and deaths climb across the country, already crushing some healthcare facilities, the most dangerous surge may still be weeks away, perhaps in January. Today, this plea from Philadelphia's health commissioner.
Please do not get together with other households for Christmas, or if you do, keep those gatherings small.
With Delta's devastation still measured in more than 1,000 lives lost every day in the U.S., a new study from Yale shows vaccines prevented 10.3 million hospitalizations and saved 1.1 million lives here at home.
But even with vaccines widely available, more lives were lost this year than last. And now again, long lines are returning for testing. And as Fenway Park sets to reopen as a mass vaccination site, NYU is canceling non-essential gatherings. Others are turning back to remote learning, while offices delay a return to work. Far too many hospitals are on the brink.
I just want people to make good decisions and be careful, because it's not fun to say goodbye to your family member garbed up with a mask on and eyewear and gloves. It's very depersonalized.
Tonight, our future looking more like our past, as progress comes with serious setbacks.
Miguel Almaguer joins us now. Miguel, despite the rise in cases, we know the White House is still saying there's no need for lockdowns around the country.
That's right, Aaron. Today, the White House was asked specifically about that. They say they expect an increase in cases, but they know the answer here is clear: vaccines. They say if more Americans vaccinated, there simply won't be a need for lockdowns. Right now, there are none of them in the clear future. Aaron.
All right, Miguel Almaguer with us tonight. Miguel, thank you. Now, for more on what we could see in the weeks ahead, let's bring in Dr. Ucha Blackstock. She's an emergency medicine physician and the CEO of Advancing Health Equity. Dr. Blackstock, we heard Miguel mention there that Dr. Fauci is saying that people who got the booster shots should be fairly well protected against Omicron and against the virus in general. And I've come to learn that well protected is not the same as invincible. A lot of people think that that's what it means. What else do we know? What else have we learned about the variant?
So we have some lab data and clinical data showing that people who got that third shot are less likely to develop the worst outcomes hospitalizations and deaths with COVID-19. We know that Omicron actually is 2 to 3 times more transmissible than Delta. It has an increased replication rate, and it's able to evade immunity. We still need to see whether or not it impacts hospitalizations and deaths in people who are fully vaccinated as well as boosted. So that remains to be seen over the next few weeks.
You know, the CDC waited a while to tell the general public, the rest of us, to get these booster shots. In some cases, people have had to wait a long time to get an appointment for one of these shots. How could that delay in booster shot rollout have impacted where we are now with Omicron?
Right. I admit the messaging has been incredibly confusing to the public. I mean, especially now with Omicron. Omicron, the difference between it and Delta is that it can evade immunity. So booster shots are even more necessary now. So we need to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to get people those boosters as soon as possible, especially our most vulnerable healthcare workers, elderly people in long-term care facilities. We really should be going all out aggressive efforts to get them vaccinated and get them boosted as soon as possible.
You know, I'm curious about what we've been seeing with colleges. We've heard Cornell, Princeton, NYU, they've canceled classes in some cases, moved things online as they roll into finals season. Do you think that this is the post-Thanksgiving surge that we're seeing now, or is this something else, something different with these universities?
Right. Well, I think we were seeing the surge even before Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving worsened it. Delta still is highly transmissible, and with Omicron here, we know that it's even more transmissible. I think these universities are making the right decisions. These non-essential gatherings could actually be super spreader events and quite dangerous.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, Christmas is right around the corner, New Year's right after that. What would your advice be if someone is thinking, oh, I'm going to go to a holiday gathering or something of that sort? What do you recommend now?
Right. I would highly recommend that people stay home this Christmas. I know that people are tired. There's pandemic fatigue. They want to be with loved ones. But right now, I will say it's incredibly dangerous to be with family and friends. Transmission levels are too high. Omicron is here. Stay home with your family. Get fully vaccinated and boosted if you're eligible.
All right. We appreciate the advice and the advice and perspective, Dr. Ucha Blackstock. Thank you. For more on the NFL and COVID, I want to bring in Sports Illustrated senior writer Albert Breer. Albert, first, I want to ask you about what you're hearing from the teams in the NFL right now. Are they concerned that these outbreaks might lead to games having to be force-fitted or major players not being able to play?
Well, I mean, like, their attitude with this whole thing going back a year has been that they're going to do whatever they can to try to get the games played. And it almost doesn't matter, you know, in a lot of cases who's out there. Last year, the Broncos started a receiver at quarterback. The Saints running back room was cleaned out before a playoff game. So they've been down this road for over a year now. I think what's interesting about this, and this is the message that Dr. Alan Sills, the league's chief medical officer, delivered to teams today, is that this is Omicron that's created this, of course, over the last 3 or 4 days. And what they found is that this is more contagious and the symptoms are milder, and that's led to teams pushing and some team executives pushing over the last couple of days with the league to try to maybe eliminate testing and incentivize guys getting the booster shot. So this is a little bit less of a problem going into January, because I think the expectation is that this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
So incentives aside, what kind of new protocols are you hearing the league is looking at right now? I mean, we saw the league really get behind vaccination pretty aggressively early on. Where is it now on mandatory booster shots, for example?
Well, I think the unions really pushed back on the idea of mandatory vaccinations, period. And, really what they've worked to do is create incentives for the vaccination. So, ahead of, ahead of training camp in the summer, they basically set up 2 separate sets of protocols. And the guys who are unvaccinated basically have to live like it's 2020. That means masking. That means you can't go out. That means you can't go away when you've got time off. You're basically locked down. Whereas guys who are vaccinated can more or less operate freely and operate not as if it was 2019, but a lot closer to that than the guys who aren't vaccinated. So they've created that, and they've created those incentives, and that's really pushed the numbers high, and where we are at about 95% now. Now the question becomes, can you do the same thing with the booster shots? And, again, one idea here was that creating an incentive where guys who get the booster shot maybe wouldn't have to get tested anymore, only would be tested if they're showing symptoms. And the unions sort of pushed back against that because they feel like any lessening of the testing is going to be a win for the league. And there's been that back and forth between the league and union. But really the idea here is to try to find a way where they can, I think, create an environment where they're going to be able to get the playoffs played and keep everybody safe. And that could wind up being some sort of combination of tamping down the testing or looking at maybe knocking down the 10-day waiting period to get back in. If you continue to test positive, maybe knock that down to 5 days or even 2 or 1 day. And then, on the other side of it, maybe increasing some of the protocols so guys have to wear masks and transmission might not be as prevalent across the facilities.
Let me ask you one last thing before we let you go. There are some people who are going to wonder out loud. These outbreaks come on the heels of Aaron Rodgers misleading the public about his vaccination status to a degree. Antonio Brown, we know, misleading his team and the league. Some critics are wondering if the league's high vaccination rate is legit.
Yeah, and that's a very real thing. And, the league has really put the ball in the team's course on this. And so, from the start, really, the league said the teams are responsible for that. And, that was sort of, when they went through the Antonio Brown case with the 2 other Bucks. One of those guys still on the team, Mike Edwards, they really said that this was up to the teams to look at this and up to the teams to be vigilant about it. And they've provided those reminders for teams. And some teams have gone back and looked and said, okay, are there signs where anybody has provided us with fake vaccination cards? I will say this, though. Anybody who's looked at one of those vaccination cards, it's not the hardest thing in the world to forge. And there were certainly plenty of rumors floating around in the summer that guys were buying vaccination cards from different places. Antonio Brown and the 2 other Buccaneers players were the ones who got busted for it, of course. It's one of those things where unless there's a real red flag, it's hard to prove. In that case, there was a red flag because those 3 cards were issued in another county outside of Tampa. But lacking some sort of piece of evidence like that is proven to be pretty hard to catch people doing this. So I think that there is a feel in the league that there are more guys who've gotten by with falsified vaccination cards. It's just really, really tough for them to track down who that is. And again, the league hasn't been, I would say, overbearing when it comes to that. They've said that that's up to the teams to try and figure it out.
All right, this conversation certainly to be continued. Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated, we appreciate your time today. Thanks.
Yeah.
Turning now to the devastation in Kentucky. 5 days after the tornado outbreak there, a deadly one, President Biden touring the scene of total destruction today and pledging federal help with the cost of recovery for the first 30 days. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez on the ground for us tonight in hard-hit Mayfield, Kentucky.
Tonight, President Biden face-to-face with towns nearly wiped off the map.
The scope and scale of this destruction is almost beyond belief. When you look around here, it's just almost beyond belief.
Today, touring devastated communities in Kentucky, victims of last week's historic tornadoes.
The government's going to cover 100% of the cost. 100% of the cost for the first 30 days for all the emergency work.
In hard-hit Mayfield, the National Guard is on the ground, cleaning up and buckling down for a massive recovery effort now underway. The cost of the damage here staggering.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a number upwards in the hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion.
The sheer power of tornadoes can often be tough to comprehend, but these twisters were especially remarkable. Some of this debris was blown 130 miles away. People on social media now reuniting owners with personal belongings. This treasured family photo from Kentucky was just found on a car windshield in Indiana.
In hours, it was all gone.
But for people like Luis Pardo, the losses are crushing. On this street, he lost 3 small businesses, a car dealership, a detail shop, and a soccer training facility for children, seen here before and after the storm. He has barely any insurance.
How overwhelming does this all feel right now? We can't sleep. I wake up at night, my wife's crying, the kids are sad because, that was their place every day.
For many, the trauma runs deep. Donna Maceda was driving home from out of state when her daughter Brianna called to tell her a tornado was barreling toward their Kentucky house.
All I could hear was her screaming for me, and Mom, I don't know what to do, and Mom, I'm so scared. And I didn't know what to say. Like, what do you say?
a helplessness no parent ever wants to feel. Incredibly, Brianna survived. Today they tried to salvage what they could.
How grateful are you to be standing here right now?
Super grateful. I definitely thought that I wasn't going to make it.
It's hard to know that she went through it by herself, and all I could do was listen.
But you made it, and she made it.
Mayfield will be okay. It's just going to be a long time.
Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Mayfield. Gabe, you mentioned there the president is pledging full federal aid for 30 days, but I can't help but to wonder, is that going to make a significant difference? I mean, how long could this cleanup take?
Well, Aaron, this recovery could take months, if not years. And local officials say it'll be at least 7 to 10 days before transmissions lines are hooked up and power poles rebuilt. And this city is still under a boil water advisory. Another long night ahead is expected, with more rain in the forecast tomorrow. Aaron?
Gabe Gutierrez in Kentucky today. Gabe, thank you. To Capitol Hill now, where the House voted to refer former President Donald Trump's chief of staff for potential prosecution. That's after Mark Meadows refused to testify before the January 6th committee. Even without Meadows' testimony, though, his text messages are revealing how Trump's inner circle tried to get the president to stop the violence at the Capitol. NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell with the latest details.
For former Trump chief of staff Mark Meadows, a historic rebuke from the chamber where he used to serve.
The yeas are 222 and the nays are 208.
The House voting mostly along party lines to hold Meadows in contempt of Congress, referring him to the Justice Department for possible prosecution after refusing to testify before the January 6th committee.
Our former colleague, Mr. Meadows, has left us no choice.
But even without testimony, Meadows provided thousands of documents, including explosive text messages revealing that on January 6, figures across the political world sent texts pleading for Trump to intervene.
They are texts that Mr. Meadows has turned over, and they are evidence of President Trump's supreme dereliction of duty for 187 minutes. Some of those text messages, Madam Speaker, came from members in the chamber right now.
Representative Cheney saying the text messages are the fundamental piece of evidence as to whether former President Trump may have committed what could amount to a crime on January 6.
Mark, one member said, he needs to stop this now. In all caps, tell them to go home. POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed.
Even Senate Republican leader McConnell, who opposed an independent commission, is watching the proceedings.
I think we're all watching, as you are, what is unfolding on the House side. And it will be interesting to reveal all the participants who were involved.
Members of the media that texted with Meadows have been identified, including Fox News hosts Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, both of whom downplayed January 6.
Quote, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy, Laura Ingraham wrote.
Both hosts responding to those text messages on their respective programs last night.
Where is the outrage in the media over my private text messages being released again publicly? Do we believe in privacy in this country? Apparently not.
Both publicly and privately, I said what I believe, that the breach of the Capitol on January 6th was a terrible thing.
Leanne Caldwell joins us now from Capitol Hill. Leanne, some of the identities of those who texted have not been publicly revealed. We know, obviously, but NBC News has confirmed that one of those text messages was sent by Ohio Representative and Trump ally Jim Jordan. What can you tell us about what he said?
That's right, Aaron. The text that was sent was about unconstitutional electors are no electors at all. Now, that's something that Jim Jordan's office said was a text that was sent to him that he then just forwarded to Mark Meadows. But the reality is that is just one of the many texts sent by lawmakers to Mark Meadows on that day and leading up to January 6th. And it shows that lawmakers are two things. Some of them were working with the White House to try try to overturn the election. Other texts show that they were worried on January 6th and calling on the former president to call things off. I spoke to the head of the committee, Benny Thompson, and he said that within time, the names of those lawmakers who sent the other texts will come out. Aaron.
Leanne Caldwell on the Hill. Leanne, thank you. Now to the high-profile trial of Kim Potter, the police officer who shot 20-year-old Dante Wright this spring near Minneapolis. The prosecution calling experts, family, and the man who trained Potter to the stand. The defense arguing Potter meant to use her taser and that the use of force was justified. Shaquille Brewster has more.
Tonight, prosecutors attempting to strengthen their case against former suburban Minneapolis police officer Kim Potter. Sergeant Mike Peterson, who trained officers, including Potter, testifying about key differences between a handgun and a taser.
Have you ever drawn your handgun when you meant to draw your taser?
Not that I recall, no.
The training officer also saying he had never seen it happen before in the department.
Have you been aware of any other officers who have drawn their handgun when they meant to draw their taser?
I don't.
Dante Wright, a 20-year-old black man, was shot and killed during an April traffic stop by Potter, a 26-year veteran of the police force who is white. His death occurring during the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who was later convicted of murdering George Floyd in nearby Minneapolis.
Say his name! Dante Wright!
Protesters clashed with law enforcement during many nights of protests. Wright's death was the third high-profile killing of a black man during a police encounter in the Minneapolis area in the past 5 years. Wright's family and attorneys saying they don't believe the shooting was an accident. The defense has called the shooting a horrific mistake, but a justifiable one because Wright had an outstanding warrant for a weapons charge, and they say his attempt to flee put other officers at risk.
You also teach that when a gun is involved on a bench warrant, that the officer should be vigilant about another gun being in the car or at issue.
Absolutely.
Or a gun being on the person, is that correct?
Yes.
And you train this over and over again, right?
Yes.
Because stopping someone in a car is one of the most dangerous things you can do.
Yes.
A national expert in policing also testifying this afternoon, concluding Potter intended to use the taser, but the accidental discharge of the firearm was unjustified.
The use of deadly force was not appropriate, and the evidence suggests that a reasonable officer in Officer Potter's position could not have believed that it was proportional to the threat at the time.
Wright's dad, likely the state's final witness, emotionally recalling his son's love for his young child.
He loved his son.
And do you love your son, Dante, a lot as well?
A lot. I love Dante. He was loved.
Now, based on those opening statements, we do know the defense witnesses will include the former police chief of the Brooklyn Center Police Department. It will include a 29-year veteran who will talk about use of force, and will also include a psychologist that will talk about the concept of action error. All of those witnesses, of course, in addition to when Kim Potter takes a stand in her own defense. Aaron?
Shaq Brewster near Minneapolis tonight. Still ahead this evening, a new twist in a decades-old case. Remains found 40 years ago, now identified as a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. How authorities made the match after all these years. Plus, cash grab outrage. Teachers scrambling for dollar bills to pay for school supplies. The organizers of the event now responding. And Subaru taking thousands of vehicles off the road because of transmission issues. What drivers need to know. We'll be right back. Back now with the viral video from South Dakota sparking outrage tonight. The contest at Center Ice during a hockey game and teachers scrambling for cash to get school supplies for their students. The video drawing criticism about underpaid educators and the lack of funding for public schools. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has more.
The video, at first glance, a fun cash grab during intermission of a hockey game. But the people seen scrambling for these dollar bills, South Dakota school teachers, in an effort to help fund classroom supplies.
It really just shows how truly broken our system is.
That system? The public education system.
You're in this every day, a teacher yourself. What did you see when you saw this?
I saw a well-intended gesture from our community, but it kind of really highlighted the meager funding structure that our teachers have to work through. to provide that high quality education that our students deserve.
The video igniting uproar over the visual of educators so frantically reaching for every dollar possible, some stuffing the money down their shirts.
Teachers should never have to grovel for money that's needed for classroom improvements.
On average, teachers are spending $750 out of their own pockets to give their students the supplies they need to learn. Average teacher salary in the 50 states, South Dakota ranks 50th.
A local hockey club and lending firm sponsored the event and donated the money seen. The organizers of the promotion wrote in a statement following the criticism, although our intent was to provide a positive and fun experience for teachers, we can see how it appears to be degrading and insulting towards the participating teachers and the teaching profession as a whole. We deeply regret and apologize to all teachers for any embarrassment this may have caused. Nationally, the average teacher salary, $65,000. And the latest data from the Census Bureau showing public schools are spending approximately $13,000 per pupil during the 2019 fiscal year.
At the end of the day, this is a teachable moment. We need to do better for our educators and our students.
And Vaughn Hilliard joins us live now here in the studio. Vaughn, it's hard to believe that somebody thought this was a good idea, first of all, but it did happen. Do we have an idea of how much money the teachers were able to get from this little effort?
Exactly. This is the hard part. Everybody we talked to in South Dakota and everybody that we have heard from there said, look, the hockey club and the company that were behind this, ultimately they were trying to donate $5,000 worth of funds for these teachers. You saw those 10 teachers. Each of them walked away with $500, but then after the blowback, they got an additional $500, and there were actually 21 other educators that applied to take part in this. Yeah. They all got money too, more than $15,000 ultimately to the cause, of course, after a tough viewing for the country.
Yeah, hard to watch, but at least the teachers got something useful out of it, so we can be happy about that. For them, teachers work so hard and are underappreciated and underpaid in so many cases. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you, sir.
Thanks, my friend.
When we come back, anti-vax murder plot. The group accused of planning to assassinate a top politician in Germany, and authorities say it was all over COVID-19 restrictions. Plus, fired over a tip, the waitress receiving more than $4,000 from one of her tables, and now she's out of a job. What she says happened next. Now to Top Stories news feed, and we begin with Derek Chauvin pleading guilty to violating George Floyd's civil rights. The former Minneapolis police officer changing his original plea and avoiding another public trial. He's also pled guilty to using excessive force when he knelt on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes back in May of 2020. Chauvin is currently serving more than a 22-year sentence for Floyd's murder. Human remains found nearly 4 decades ago have been identified as musician Frank Little Jr. Little was a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame group, the OJs. The remains were found in a garbage bag near Cleveland in 1982. They were identified by a nonprofit that uses genetic genealogy to identify John Does. Little was last seen in the Cleveland area in the 1970s. And a consumer alert tonight, Subaru recalling nearly 200,000 vehicles. This recall includes Ascent and Outback SUVs and legacy sedans. These cars made between 2019 and 2020. Subaru says a chain in the transmission can break, causing a loss of power. Affected owners will be notified in February. And next tonight, to the holiday tip now that may have cost a waitress her job. The Arkansas server says she was fired after getting a $4,000 tip from a generous table, and now the restaurant is disputing her claims. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has more.
So we are tipping a total of $4,400.
What started with tears of joy shifting to sadness as the server seen in this video fired after receiving a generous tip and a conflict over sharing it. Ryan Brandt and one of her co-workers waited on a group of more than 30 real estate agents who had decided to do a $100 dinner club challenge where each person tips their server $100.
Wait here, this is for you.
Grant Wise, the president of the real estate company, organized the dinner.
It was an incredible thing to be able to do, to see the server's reaction and to know what that meant for her and the impact it's had on her life already.
But Brandt says she was told she could not keep her share of the tip.
I was to give my cash over to my shift manager to be taken, and then that I was going to be taking home 20%.
Brandt says she told the group of diners that she would have to split the tip with the entire staff. Wise then asked the restaurant for the money back to give it to her specifically. Brandt says this is why she was fired several days later.
It was devastating.
But the restaurant owners dispute this in an interview with NBC's Northwest Arkansas affiliate.
The employee terminated was not terminated for retaining the tip received that evening. Due to the privacy and the respect for our employees, we don't discuss those employee affairs publicly.
Wise said he had called ahead to make sure the restaurant did not pull tips, which is common industry practice.
They did not call ahead and ask of our tipping policy, nor did they email and ask about our tipping policy. But because of the guest's request, we honored it and just handed it out to the servers that they had asked us to distribute it to.
The server that we worked with the closest was let go.
Once Wise heard Brandt had been fired, he started this GoFundMe in an effort to help again.
I think it's incredibly unfortunate, and especially this close to the holidays. We're going to try to help her raise enough money to get through the next couple of months.
Maura Barrett joins us now from Chicago. Kind of a weird twist, Maura, on a nice act of kindness here. Was that GoFundMe successful?
Well, Aaron, there's some gray area, right, in exactly why Brandt was fired, and we were not able to get any further clarification from the restaurant. But the good news is that she was able to find another job, and the GoFundMe was successful. They raised nearly $9,000, and now Wise says that he and his coworkers are going to keep the GoFundMe up and use that money that they raised for the next restaurant that they decide to go to for their $100 dinner club. Aaron.
All right, Maura Barrett for us in Chicago. Maura, thank you. Now to top stories, global watch and a deadly roof collapse in Mexico. That roof caving in at a shopping mall in Tijuana. Rescue crews extracting at least 4 people trapped under the debris there. At least 1 person killed, 6 others injured. The cause of that collapse now under investigation. And the royal honor for a Formula One driver, Lewis Hamilton, knighted by Prince Charles at Windsor Castle today. The race car driver receiving the honor just days after a pretty controversial loss that cost him a record 8th title. The 36-year-old now the 4th Grand Prix driver to be knighted. To Germany now, where police today foiled an assassination plot aimed at one of the country's top politicians. Officials there say the 4 men and 1 woman they arrested were part of an online anti-vaxx group and that they had weapons, including a crossbow, seized from their homes. Here's NBC News correspondent Claudio Lavanga.
Tonight, police in Germany arresting 5 anti-vaccine activists for plotting to assassinate a top politician over what they call restrictive COVID measures. Armed law enforcement raiding multiple homes in Saxony, removing boxes of evidence, finding several weapons, including a gun and crossbows. The primary target, that state's top elected official, Michael Kretschmer, who had been the subject of repeated death threats in an anti-vax group on the messenger app Telegram.
Bedrohungen gegen
Kretschmer, whose state has one of the lowest vaccination rates in Germany, today saying you can of course say what you don't like, but when violence comes into play, a line is crossed that we will not tolerate. The anger over vaccine mandates and COVID protocols, a familiar scene across Europe, where roughly 1/3 of the population remains unvaccinated. The continent in the throes of yet another deadly wave of the virus, driven by the Delta variant and now the rapidly spreading Omicron strain. Protesters taking to the streets in the Czech Republic, Belgium and Spain this month in defiance of restrictions reimposed to curb the spread. The demonstrations at times turning violent. In Brussels, police using tear gas and water cannons on the crowds, who tossed back rocks and fireworks.
I am a natural being and I want to choose over my own body and my own free will, and that's why I'm here.
And across the continent, tens of thousands turning up to massive rallies despite rising cases, voicing frustrations about mandatory vaccinations, mask mandates, and bans on unvaccinated individuals in certain spaces.
I'm here because I'm against forced vaccinations, I'm for human rights, and The violation of human rights should be stopped.
But with officials in Europe warning of a tidal wave of infections due to Omicron now pushing booster shots, those tensions are likely to dissipate anytime soon. Claudio Lavanga, NBC News, Rome.
And coming up, chasing the cure, the simple blood test that researchers say could detect cancer sooner. And our Kate Snow spoke with one man who says that test probably saved his life. That's next. We're back now with a real breakthrough in the fight against cancer. A Silicon Valley startup developing a groundbreaking blood test that can screen for more than 50 cancers and would help doctors catch tumors before they spread. NBC's senior national correspondent Kate Snow has the details.
Cancer was the last thing 76-year-old Jim Ford was worried about. Were you in pretty good health?
Very good health, yeah. I didn't take any pills. I played golf once or twice a week.
Through Sutter Health in California, he volunteered to be part of a study on a blood test that can screen for more than 50 cancers. He was shocked when the results came back positive. Then his physician ordered scans and found stage 2 cancer in his pancreas. Jim and his wife were devastated.
She literally collapsed on the living room floor and sobbed. Because we were both thinking it was a death sentence.
But that test probably saved his life because the cancer was found early.
This is where the processing begins.
Dr. Josh Hoffman is president of Grail, a Silicon Valley startup that created the Gallery test.
Most cancer deaths are happening in cancers that we're not screening for at all.
Nobody's finding them.
That's exactly right.
Only 5 major cancers have screening tools like mammograms or colonoscopies. 71% of cancer deaths are caused by other cancers.
We're losing almost 2,000 of our loved ones every day, and it's because we're finding most cancer too late.
Gallery looks at blood for DNA shed by cancer tumors. If it sees that DNA, then it predicts where the cancer is.
So if it says cancer signal detected, predicted location, ovary, the doctor will know to do an imaging test of the pelvis.
The Gallery test is available now by prescription, but is not covered by insurance. Cost to the patient, $950. A positive result is not always right. Up to half will turn out not to be cancer. But researchers at the National Cancer Institute say the results so far could potentially revolutionize cancer screening, and they're designing bigger studies. After surgery, chemo, and radiation.
How are you?
Jim's surgical oncologist says his latest scan looks great.
To catch it at stage 2 is a big deal. Yeah, I mean, it's like winning the lottery.
Jim is hoping his story might save others. He recently got to hold his new granddaughter.
I was able to go back and see her. It meant a lot.
Those are happy tears, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Kate Snow, NBC News, Menlo Park, California.
When we come back, the major holiday surprise. Staff at a Miami high school receiving $18,000 checks right before Christmas. Who was behind that once-in-a-lifetime gift and why? Well, finally tonight, it has been a difficult 2 years for educators, with the pandemic impacting schools at their core. Teachers and staff notoriously underpaid. Well, now a multi-millionaire is making a big gift to his high school alma mater just in time for the holidays. Isa Gutierrez has the story.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime Christmas present for the staff of this Miami high school.
Today I'll be providing a $3.1 million tip to everybody that works here.
But instead of Santa Claus, it's wealthy American businessman and TV personality Marcus Lemonis.
It's $3.5 million, and I want 75% of the business.
Delivering the incredible gift to his alma mater, Columbus High. $18,000 for each person who works at the school.
Teachers have had such a huge impact on my life.
Lemonis was the host of the CNBC show The Prophet.
To give you love and
cash. This gift is part of his Great American Tip-Off, an effort to tip and recognize service workers across the country.
I thought, let me just put some money down. Let me affect the people in my life that matter to me and hope that other people say, well, I can't do that, but I can do this. And it doesn't have to be 18,000, but it does have to be meaningful. And by the way, meaningful could be a $50 gift card. It could be $100. It could be buying school supplies.
For many of these staff members, this money is life-changing.
Oh, this is the best day ever. I mean, this is the absolute best day ever. My wife, I just called her and she didn't believe me. She's in shock.
I'm not the most emotional person in the world, but I got super emotional.
Some already know exactly where the money's going.
I would like to use the money to pay off some debt, to help my family have a nice Christmas.
I have 3 kids, 3 different jobs. When someone gives you that gift, it's a complete weight lifted off your shoulders. We're definitely saving money for our children's college fund.
But during this global pandemic, it's about more than the money.
Hearing someone care about what we do, especially, I have to honestly say, after last year, we had a very rough year. I know in education overall, but there are some days that you wonder, does anybody care about what I'm doing?
The fact that nobody's beating the drum to understand how we don't get teachers a $5,000, $10,000 bump, how we don't have them be one of the higher paid individuals in the service industry, it's a little confusing for me.
And the thing is, giving, it's contagious.
I definitely want to be able to give back to the community, to make an impact, and maybe help someone else have a nice Christmas as well.
The most important thing is that the next Marcus Lemonis was in that crowd yesterday. And our students came back and they were like, that's going to be me one day.
Isa Gutierrez, NBC News.
Showing us how to pay it forward indeed. Thank you so much for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Aaron Gilchrist in New York. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. Tom Llamas back with you tomorrow night. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.